Welcome to this channel where we explore all things mycology and so much more. From a single nucleus to cultures we create, experimentation and innovation is never too late. Join me on this adventure where follow science plays.
Thank you for joining me today. I'm getting ready to flip a lot of my grows into fruiting. With some of them, it's giving them a little bit more air. Some, just moving them to a more oxygenated environment. And then I got a couple where we got to move them to an environment with lower temps. This is one of the reasons why I work with grow chambers. So this is a grow chamber that I made. It's been running for about 2.5 years. I recently did a modification where I added a fan to that side. But basically I just had this fan, and since it's not sealed at the bottom, depending on if I wanted to induce fresh air or take out heat, I would change the direction of the fan. So when I wanted to take out the heat, because it would be up here because cooler temps and CO2 dropped, that I would pull the heat out while pulling up moisture in
from
the air.
the hydrated inconsistent pad.
So it's been working out pretty good. Down here is where it all began, my sob. You can see how I added these ports so I could sterilize my sob, leave it, sterilize my arms, go back in. I even started out with veterinary gloves that would go up to my shoulder, and then I would clean my gloves, stick it in there, and then fold the sleeve over and rubber band it so I can go in and out without possibly introducing contaminants. It's okay. I got some 70% ISO. So once I built the flow hood, I really didn't have a use for the sob. That's where I add my petri dishes after I pour them now. Because of temperature changes, having this between the outside environment, I don't have any issues with condensation or, I mean, if we drop 10 degrees there, most likely it would be, but it really helps litigate that issue. And then this is my first automated one, and it did all right. If I upgraded the controller and the fan, it would be a lot better. But over the years, I played with what port I would have open for fresh air or which one I plugged. But for what I want to do, the issue I have with this is, you can see we have our fan, and this is where the hose for our humidifier goes. And you take a 5-pound block, set it in here to fruit, that bag is directly in line with the flow from the humidifier. Even if you run a 6-quart in here, so it'd be right above the 6-quart. And that, there's some mushrooms that like that. If they like a little bit of wet cap, that's fine. So we're gonna build another fruiting tub. We're gonna use the combination of what I learned from the 66 quart compared to this one. We're gonna use the fan and the controller from it, along with the humidifier. And I got another 66 quart tub downstairs. My idea is we're gonna take the fan and the connector for the hose and we're gonna modify the downstairs tub so we can put everything down here. And then what that'll do is we put it up here in this area. Look how much more room we have compared to here. So we're gaining almost 6 inches more height. I think it's going to be a great addition to chamber grows. Let's get ourselves organized, and I'll see you at the workbench. So now we're down at the table, and having these tubs side by side, you can see we're going to be able to move that all the way up to here. And I'm not sure if I want to keep the fan set up the same way. Like, I've also thought about humidity coming this side and the fan coming from this side and hit the flow and disperse it. But I think what that's going to do, it would condense the flow into bigger droplets. So what I'm going to do this run, we're going to run it the same way. We're just going to move everything up a little bit further. I have this soldering pen. When it's at its highest temp, it's reading right around 400 degrees Celsius. So we're going to use this to cut out our square for the fan and the hole for the port. So here's our fan. I ended up removing the cover because I ended up losing one screw and nut already. So I was like, I'll put them in here and then I won't drop them anymore. But on the one side of the fan, it had the screen. And no matter which way you turn it, it lines up for our holes and our outline. So I'm going to use this as a template. Get a little Scotch tape. We'll put our fan. Not even going to measure it. I'm just going to put it on. Oh, there. Just in case, put another piece of tape on. So now we'll take our marker and we'll trace around this. And then we'll put a dot right in the middle because I don't want to cut that whole hole. And there's our pattern. And then we'll, one more time, we'll put our fan up and make sure we are in line. Now I'm going to come in just inside that edge of our first line there, and then we're going to thicken up our line up here a little bit more, because whatever lines we're using, we're cutting on the inside of them. I'm not sure on the make of the kit, but it's just a basic soldering kit. I actually got this so I could tear it apart. A few times I wish I had a electronic scalpel, but I haven't really seen any out there. So I was like, that's something, another one of these things I'm going to have to make. So I really like how this is set up because I can machine that. I'm just not sure if it's using a nickel titanium wire or not. But it cuts plastic really good. And I can change the tips also. 420, baby. So 420 degrees Celsius. That's pretty hot. Alright, so let's cut our hole. And then it was just re-melting back. So now we're going to burn a hole, and then we're going to put a screw in it to keep it open. pull that one out. So there we go. Now you can see I got so much buildup on it. So what I need to do is I need to let it cool down and get that plastic off. Let's add my screws, even though we only got 3 of them. We're going to add the plate to our fan. And then next we just got to add these 3 nuts. Looks pretty clean finished, I'd say. And we're good to go. So the next thing, we got to add our connector, because that's what our hose goes to. This goes in the tub, and then this goes in after. So we need to mark a spot for that. So that's our hole. And I might have to make it a little bit bigger. There we go. We'll try going with that for right now. We got a little distortion there. But what really counts is this collar. If I notice anything, I can just clean up that side right there. So now we got our top part almost done. So the next thing, we're going to have to add a couple holes, kind of like the same way that bin was, but not as many because I don't use them. And a lot of times when I was using that style one, I'd have all the holes blocked off except the end ones, because the fresh air that this fan was introducing was enough. So what I think I'm going to do, I'm going to modify the air ports by observing what my grow is doing. If I notice lengthening of stems, then we'll cut holes in and give it more fresh air. Because even though this is a container with a lid, CO2 buildup can still escape and it's not airtight. I'm just not really sure where I want to put the holes yet. Now that we got our fan and our hose attachment installed, we're going to cut out our holes. I'm going to use a hole saw, but I got to change how I was going to use it. I couldn't find my adapter. So I'm going to line up a pair of pliers and then use my torch. And then I'm going to heat up the end of it and see if I can punch it out nice and clean. Make sure you're in a well ventilated area. I was expecting more of this paint to burn off, but it's not. So we're going to start out with one on each side and one on the end. If we need more airflow, we can always put one up here, one down there. We can always add more. Next, we're going to put all this together, set it up, and add our cultures that we want to fruit. So we made some progress. You can see where we cut our ports. I just put a piece of micropore tape over it. And then on this end, I just placed the humidity controller sensor through that end. And then I also added one of my sensors to confirm what I was seeing on my controller was pretty much the same as the sensor was reading. Another thing I'm going to try is I'm going to add an inconsistency pad down at the bottom. What I'm thinking is going to happen is any excess moisture that falls out of the air, this pad's going to pick it up. And then through the dynamics of the chamber, it'll eventually release that excess moisture in the air, kind of coasting the relative humidity. And it might save on cycles from the humidifier. Maybe if this is putting a little bit of moisture in the air and holding it in the tub, then our humidifier won't cycle as much. So if you notice at the bottom, there's a non-absorbent part. And then you have your absorbent part up here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it in a way where we have absorbent all the way around. So if there is any excess humidity, it won't lead to standing water because our pad will absorb it. If you look at our bottom, you can see it has this channel that goes all the way around. And what I'm doing is I'm going to fold the pad to stay inside this channel. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of water to help hold it down. I'm also going to add a little platform to help position the block better. I'm just going to spray it down with isopropyl. Something I forgot to also mention, before I took this apart, I've already wiped everything down with 70% ISO. So now we have our platform ready. Here's the star of the show. This is a Appalachian Enoki from Mossy Creek Mushroom. I did 2 pounds of wild bird seed spawn, and then I did 5 pounds of substrate. And it did really good colonizing around 73 degrees. But now we're going to move it downstairs where it's almost 10 degrees cooler. What I plan on doing, we're going to do a slice. I'm not really sure how to cut it for the first time. I thought about standing up the block
And top fruit it.
but I've seen a lot of people just do the slice. So maybe I might do an H slice so I have 2 flaps, and then the Enoki can kind of show me what it wants to do. So before I wipe down my block, I'm going to sterilize a scalpel to make my cut. So I'm going to spray paper towel, spray the bag. Going to be careful about the filter. Wipe the whole bag down. I think because of the belly this way, that's the way we're going to fruit it. Because maybe we might end up with problems with all the wrinkles over here. So I think I'm going to do an H cut. So we're going to cut make our 2 vertical slices about 1 inch long or so. And then I'm going to make 1 slice across the center. And that should give us 2 flaps for our gnocchi to fruit from. There we go. And there's our flaps. And then I have a little bottle of sterile water. And we're going to open that up. I'm going to give it a little mist, just to help signal that it's there. And that's it. And then we're going to do a little bit. And that's it. So now we have our block cut. We'll set our block on our base. And the flow is going to be coming this way. And we're going to be fruiting this way. So what I'm going to do is we're going to tilt this way a little bit. And now that I'm thinking, maybe I should cover that filter up, If the humidity's coming in, that could saturate that filter. So there we go. So we got our block setting at the correct angle. Put our lid on, and I'm going to latch it. Another thing, important thing to remember is if we leave it at this elevation, we're going to have a big dip in our hose, and that can affect our humidifier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise the tub up to where the inlet to the tub is higher than the outlet of the humidifier. Now that we got it up here even further, I'm going to move this down a little bit. So here's our tub up at a better level to connect our humidifier, and with the inlet being higher than the outlet, we'll have a better quality of mist, and then we also won't have pooling water in our holes that could potentially harvest bacteria. So what I'm going to set the tub up for is for it to go to 98% humidity and shut off, and then come back on at 90%. And then because this is an enclosed environment, it will keep a consistent 96 to 98. I just have to have periods of it to drop down to 90%, because then I don't oversaturate the air. But in case I do and it falls out, have the inconsistent pad to trap that excess moisture. So let's turn our humidifier on and see how this flow goes. We'll put the fan on and see how this unfolds. So our humidity is going up. Our fan is going. You can hear it. And I have our fan on the very low setting. And there's our humidity coming in. It's flowing above. Whatever falls out is just going to be recirculated and add to the overall conditions to our tub. Over here on my humidifier, I'm going to remark where my level is, and then I can also use that to visualize how much moisture is being put in the air. And you can see we got room. We could put another block in here. And that was the idea, but this block isn't fully colonized, but it's getting there. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to flip my block upside down and allow some of that CO2 to drop out, and then maybe I can get some more fresh air up in here, and that'll continue the growth. So we're going to let this run and do its thing. Once we got some activity around our H-cut, we'll check back in and see how the setup is doing. Well, we're about 10 days into the fruiting of this Enoki, and that H-cut we did is looking pretty good. I kinda wish I made a bigger cut. So let's take a look at it, and we'll also go over some of the dynamics that I changed. But let's take a look at that Enoki. And there's a better look at our pin set. Looking really strong to me. And I'm really, actually, I'd like to try top fruiting it next time. We could get that whole surface to pin like that. But I'm really curious to see how they do like this. Like you can see our bottom flap right there. So let's add this back to our tub. We'll orientate it where we ain't worried about the mist hitting it. On a previous video where I showed how I ran the original grow chamber at the bottom, I went back to using the same method where I'd put an extension cord into my controller, and then I would run the humidifier and the fan up here on the same cycle. So I have the perimeter set for the humidifier to shut off at 98% relative humidity and to turn on when it drops below 94% relative humidity. While it's acclimating itself, the fan is running, giving just enough fresh air where I'm still using only 3 ports. 1 port here, 1 port there, and 1 port on the other side, because that fan is creating enough fresh air exchanged. Since this is doing good also, I'm going to add one of my other experimental tubs to this grow chamber. We won't even have to worry about saturating our surface conditions. I'm going to make sure our probe isn't on our bag though. And there we go. This is really up in the air on the light, but I have it, so I don't think it's going to hurt. Give them a little full spectrum light. We got our fan just above low, and I'll put our tube back on. So we'll continue to let this grow chamber do its thing. We'll check back in and see how they're doing in a future video. So thank you for joining me. Please like, subscribe, and you will be notified. And I'll see you all on the next one. Have a great day.